Like, I wish there was like a better, somebody could tell me like what to do.
Nearly 40% of children and teens experience anxiety. Coming up, a new video series working to guide coaches, teachers, parents, and students. Good morning. It is Friday, November 18th. I'm Jessica Lovell. Welcome into the Morning Medical Update. We are live inside the Dolph C. Simons Jr. Family Broadcast Studio. Mental health matters, particularly in students who compete in various sports and activities. School staff, coaches, and teachers are often the first to notice if a student is struggling. Make sure to get your questions sent in to us today on YouTube, Facebook, and the Medical News Network. You can find links to all of those right there on your screen. But first, we are making our morning rounds today. Injuries and violence are the leading cause of death and disabilities for people from ages 1 to 44. We are joined today by trauma critical care nurse Olivia Desmarais. Olivia, good morning. Our viewers might notice more people wearing green today, and that is because it is National Injury Prevention Day. Tell us why a day like this is just so important to mark.
Injuries are the leading cause of death and disability for people ages 1 to 44. Even if someone survives a traumatic injury, oftentimes their life has changed irreparably.
So what are the most frequent injuries that you see here at the University of Kansas Health System?
Yeah, here at the University of Kansas Health System, our top mechanisms of injury are first, older adult falls, second, motor vehicle crashes, and third, interpersonal violence.
So you were previously a trauma nurse in the ICU here at the health system. You spent years taking care of people in need who've had injuries. Now, as the injury prevention coordinator, tell us how you help prevent those injuries and what you really want us to keep in mind.
Yeah, so we focus on developing and implementing evidence-based programs that are aimed at preventing these top mechanisms of injury. For instance, I'm a master trainer in Matter of Balance, which is an evidence-based fall prevention class for older adults. We host car fit events to ensure that older adults are safely positioned in their vehicle in case of a collision. And we've launched our hospital-based violence intervention program, Revive, which provides supports for victims of violence after they're discharged from the hospital.
Doing such fantastic work, and especially bringing up falls as we enter this time of year and we're around our loved ones, our aging loved ones. So thank you for the reminder of that. We appreciate you reminding us of this important day. So thank you so much, Olivia. Always good to see you.
Thanks for having me. Thanks.
You bet. Well, more children and teenagers are experiencing depression or suicidal thoughts compared to 15 years ago. That's according to the U.S. Health and Human Services Department. Suicide is the second leading cause of death, ages 10 to 24. Involvement in activities can provide physical, social, and emotional benefits, as we know, but it can also add more stress and anxiety. So KSHA, the Kansas State High School Activities Association, created a 5-part video series called Mental Health Matters. Its goal is to help coaches, sponsors, and school leadership to better support students who may be struggling with mental health issues. So we want to welcome in our guest today, Dr. Annie Weese. She is Director of Mental Wellness and Sports Psychology with K-State Athletics. And here in studio with me is Medical Director of Youth Sports Medicine, Dr. David Smith. He also serves on the KSHA committee. Good morning to you.
Morning, Jessica.
Always
good to be here.
Always good to see you. Dr. Weese, welcome to you.
Thank you so much. Good to see you both.
Yes, so I want to talk about, Dr. Smith and I were just talking about how much mental health has really edged its way to the top of the list when it comes to students, in particular athletes. So I just want to take us back to what went into the concept of making these videos and then how you made them.
I think, as the COVID pandemic started and we were all shut down, our committee met much more frequently than we were supposed to, just to develop policies and keep up with the trends we were seeing. And we were getting a lot of data about the physical impact of COVID, and that was kind of guiding our policies. But I think there was this overall sense of helplessness about what we knew was coming, the mental health concerns through the pandemic. So we were able to use that kind of restlessness, I think, to brainstorm what can we do about this? What action can this spark or promote? And so a subcommittee was formed to talk about what do we most want people to know about this. And that guided us into deciding, who is our audience? What way do we want to get this information out to folks? And we all agreed on short video clips, easily digestible, that won't take up your entire day, with really pointed facts about what they might see as sports and activity sponsors and how they can intervene when a concern arises. And, I have a face for radio, but I was the face on these videos. And so we got a crew together that were wonderful, and we used my sister as a coach at Silver Lake. We used their facilities because we wanted it to look relatable and be in spaces where these coaches and club sponsors might be also.
So we're going to put a bit.ly link up on the screen so that you can have access to these videos. Anyone can reach out, click, and watch them. In just a moment, I'm going to show you some excerpts from the video, but I want to ask how you recruited these particular students to come forward and be open and talk.
These students were there's a student advisory committee for Acacia. Just like Dr. Smith and I are on the sports medicine advisory committee, there was already a group of students that were meeting at the Acacia offices. So it was a really kind of organic group of students, and they were very eager to help us with this project.
So I want to introduce you to a couple of them, and then I would like you, Dr. Weese and Dr. Smith, to just comment on the message that they're sending. So let's listen in and see what Olivia has to say.
I think getting pressure from adults, because especially parents, sometimes they want their kids to be like this outstanding student, and every student is outstanding in their own way. So I just think, let us find our way in high school, find what we enjoy. And sometimes people just don't understand how everything can just come at you all at once.
Oh boy, we all feel that sometimes. Dr. Weese, talk to us a little bit about that parent pressure and that pressure to be that great student.
She is describing pressure. And I work with this all the time at the collegiate level. I can't give this up because my parents put so much into me, or my parents spent thousands of dollars driving me around to the clubs or camps. It's the sense that the child or adolescent has of wanting to please parents, feeling obligated to return to the parents what they've invested in them, and it could lead to a significant amount of distress and burnout as well. The pressure doesn't just come from parents either. It can be internal or from coaches, but it's coming from everywhere.
It is coming all at you at once, as Olivia just said. Dr. Smith, you get a chance to see parents and students together in clinic. I mean, you must feel that pressure and see that dynamic happening.
Yes. Every week I will see student athletes where I perceive that there's some external pressure on them to perform at a high level, and sometimes injuries will detract from that high level, and sometimes it's just they're burned out. We don't want to just pick on parents, because sometimes that's from inside that athlete, that they've set very high expectations, unreasonable expectations, or coaches that see a skill in an athlete and push them extra hard, or a peer. And it's hard, because we got to remember these are adolescents and they have not fully matured the emotional center in their brain. It's hard enough for us as adults to sometimes handle those kind of pressures, let alone an adolescent that is still developing. So yes, I see it. I can even recall just this week 2 incidences that I had to at least think through that potential complicating factor of parental pressure or expectations from a student athlete as they move on into higher level, potentially collegiate athletics.
And something that we were talking to Dr. Smith, how this is not how things were when you first got into this field and this profession, because you're having to talk about those mental aspects, something that you weren't really doing years ago.
It's interesting because, again, you've kind of picked on me. I'm definitely older, but in my competitive years, my coach used the term mental fortitude, and he kept preaching mental fortitude, and now we hear physicality and mental toughness and all this, but the reality is that athletes are becoming more willing to share these emotions. I was telling you before we started the program, I'm seeing athletes screaming at coaches on the sideline. I'm seeing athletes crying on the sideline. I'm seeing athletes withdrawing, sitting over in the corner of the bench, and they just want to be left alone. And we do need time to have space, maybe to process those emotions, but we need to it's not like that old movie, There's No Crying in Baseball. I work at the major league level, and I see major league players, and I worked formerly at the NFL level, and I can tell you this is prevalent at all levels. It's not just down at the high school and middle school level.
I want to take a look at Jackson, and he's another student that participated in this 5-part video series. And let's just see what kind of stresses and challenges he's facing.
I'm a quarterback, so it could be a Wednesday night, I might be worrying about who's coming off of the edge while I'm working on an English assignment, So things can add up together, but doing this my whole life, I've kind of learned how to balance it all out and have figured out those stresses. I've known I have to get my homework done, I have to watch film at this time, I have to practice is practice, nothing else.
Dr. Weese, when I hear him say I have to watch film, I've got to, come home and get my English assignment going on, I've got to be thinking about all of these things. It makes me think back when I was in high school. I thought I never took on those kind of responsibilities. And so to see these young kids take all that on and try to navigate and balance it all, I can see where Jackson's coming from.
Yes, and he is talking about the stressors. He's a quarterback, a really cool kind of romanticized position on a team, and he's talking about his struggles. And what he didn't name, but what I heard him say was he developed this sense of a mindfulness, being able to be wherever he is in that moment at that time. So on Wednesday during class, his mind is Wednesday during class on the test. If we let our mind go to Friday and all the bad things that could happen on Friday, well, then we're feeling anxious and stressed and overwhelmed. So Jackson very eloquently described the sense of a mindfulness practice. And if there's 2 things I can give my athletes here at K-State, it would be proper and effective sleep and a daily mindfulness routine. So that's what he was describing.
Yeah, and it allows you to get through all of those things and to be able to find that balance. But I love what you said, that romanticized position of a quarterback, and here he is, the leader of a team. You talked about this, Dr. Smith. It's the parent expectation and the peer expectation out on the field and the people that you're surrounded with.
Yes, there's no doubt. And we even profiled just a few weeks ago a concussed athlete that struggled getting through his concussion. And a lot of the complicating factors there were the expectations he had academically. This young man, a very bright young man with multiple honors classes, and when we talk about cognitive rest during concussion, and he tells me I studied 7 hours on Sunday for a history class, and I'm thinking, if it's a Chiefs guy that has a concussion, he's not going home and studying 7 hours on a class. So
he's resting.
He's resting. Good sleep. Andy, thank you for bringing that up, because sleep patterns and just that mindfulness, being able to separate sports and academics and the stress of maybe a relationship is so important. I used to watch in the halftime of games sometimes, our academic students at high school would grab their physics book and read some paragraphs of physics after their coach finished talking. I'm thinking, how do they do that? When I was in athletics, it was I'm running, I'm practicing, and then I go do my academics.
Yeah, that was like the side job.
They're balancing a lot more than we had to back in our day.
Well, and you have talked so much about, it's their kids first, their people first, their students second, and then their athletes.
Right.
And it's got to go in that order. Dr. Weese, your thoughts on that?
Well, and that's why I intentionally included the information about brain development also, because we're asking these teenagers to juggle and manage all of these things, and their prefrontal cortex isn't even fully developed. So they're not able to think through decisions the way that we want them to as adults in their lives.
Dr. Smith, we were talking about just in particularly how injuries connect back to mental health, how that affects somebody. It's not just the pain, physical pain, but it's the mental recognition that life may be changing for them.
Yes, there's no doubt about that when they have, whether it's a minor injury or much more severe, it can really send them in a tailspin. And in fact, I think of the example of a collegiate baseball player that I got a call on a weekday morning that the night before he had gone out. This happened to be a K-State athlete, Dr. Weese, that he had torn out his ACL the week before. It was his senior season. He knew that he was done. He was a pitcher. He was a very good pitcher. And he decided life is done. And when I met with him the next day, his comment was, I've been playing baseball since I'm 5 years old. It is my life. And now it's just been taken away from me. And that's what I was thinking when he about almost committed suicide. Thank goodness he called his girlfriend, who accessed resources to get him the help that he needed. But I'll never forget that incident as one that, wow, we need to remember that injuries that slow them down or they can't meet their expectations can really send them downhill.
And this is not the first time we've heard stories like that. And Dr. Weese, I'm sure you remember the story of recently the young woman who committed suicide on a collegiate level. Everyone thought she was happy, doing well, popular. Everyone loved her. People become used to masking this because there's such an expectation that everything's going well. Talk with us a little bit through that.
Yeah, athletes are masters at masking. I think what we value in our society and in sports is toughness, grit. We teach children at a young age, especially our young boys, what it means to be men. And that does not include asking for help, expressing my emotions when I have them. So everything is stacked up against athletes being able to vulnerably and comfortably share their insecurities or their fears or sadnesses. So they're excellent maskers. This was a scary spring because we had really high achieving collegiate athletes dying by suicide. And that's a really scary position to be in when you're in my side of things, when your job is to protect and prevent suicides from happening.
Well, and we hear these stories, and it's shocking when we hear them on the news, but then when you say that you're hearing them, and you know they're in every corner, on every field, in high schools and colleges, it really has to make you stop in your track and reprioritize. Is this something, Dr. Weese, that would be helpful for parents and students to watch together? What could the takeaway be for a parent?
Absolutely. I think the original audience were for the coaches and activity sponsors, but the more we looked at the content, I realized I'm presenting the same information to sport administrators, to athletic trainers. I think anyone that knows somebody that's a middle school and up, knows somebody, cares about somebody, loves somebody in that age range, needs to be watching these videos. And I think a few takeaways could be, clearly our young folks are suffering and they're craving connection. A lot of those students said, I wish someone would check in on us, ask us how we're doing. And then the third takeaway would be, ask the question. I talk about the question in those videos. The question is, are you feeling suicidal? We need to be asking that question to the people we love when we see these red flags.
And Dr. Weese, I've heard from many of our psychiatrists and psychologists here that talking about suicide does not create a thought of suicide, that it's okay to bring that word up and talk about it, correct?
That's exactly right. I think two biggest myths about suicide are, one, if I introduce the idea, then they're going to have it and might do something with it. And two, if I ask if someone's feeling suicidal, they'll be mad at me. Well, I'd rather have someone mad at you and alive to repair that relationship than no longer with us. And by this age, we're seeing suicides at younger and younger age. I mean, I'm talking 6, 7, 8. So by the time they get into high school, they have heard about suicide. Their access to information and social media, they know about suicide. It would have crossed their mind at some point. So asking will not introduce the idea to them.
Dr. Smith, I want to ask you about how we're enhancing our mental health program here at the health system.
Yes, I think of two major areas this year. One is which, we have emergency action plans for emergencies, head and neck injuries, how we remove helmets, stabilize necks, call in the 911 and get emergency personnel there. Well, this year in all of the districts that we are involved with contracted athletic trainers to the schools, we started emergency mental health action plans. So we have a very specific plan in place. If a student might make a comment in the training room or on the practice field, or a coach hears something, that they know how to access this very well laid out plan to how to get that young athlete help. And hopefully, and fortunately, we have not had any bad incidences to my knowledge this year, but it's in place, it was practiced, it was, the coaches were educated, the administrators, and we're very pleased that it's in place. That's one way.
Yeah.
The other is that we now have, actually with part of KU Health System, we are fortunate to have people like Dr. Weese, who's obviously an expert. We have two psychologists. One is really was hired to help with concussed athlete and some of the problems that they may have with mental health issues with concussion. The other is a sports psychologist that we just hired from Nebraska, who is going to work across the board with our young athletes at all levels, and not just on sports performance, but some of the issues that we've just talked about here today. In fact, I just talked to him yesterday about a young athlete from a local high school who I think needs his services before this athlete goes off to college. And it's just great to have those resources. And Dr. Weese, I just have to give you a shout out. She's very humble about these videos that you made and all the work that went behind it. And thank you, because they're easy to watch. They're full of excellent content. I encourage everybody, athletes, parents, coaches, administrators, physicians, anybody involved with student athletes, to take the time to watch these videos. They're very well done. So thanks, Dr. Weese.
And let's put that bit.ly link back up there so that you can have access. And there's also a QR code on your screen that will take you to a list of self-care resources and places to find help and support. And yeah, Dr. Smith took the words right out of my mouth. I was just going to say, Dr. Weese, before we started, he was really giving you that due credit for the work that you do, and really helping leading the charge. And really, you were talking about how this is a statewide crisis, and something that has to be, this is not by school and by area, this is a statewide. And has been your motivation and just certainly your secret to success, Dr. Weese?
Well, I mean, Dr. Smith was a huge motivation. Every time we met with SMAC, he said, this needs to be done. This needs to be a priority. I remember him saying, if we put the money and time and resources into mental health the way we do ACL surgeries, we'd be in a pretty good place. So that inspires me. I have nieces and nephews at the high school and junior high level right now, highly competitive. I'm doing this for them. I'm doing this for myself with 2 young children. I think it should be our priority, and it's the most important project I was a part of this past year.
Let's take a quick break and check in with Dr. Dana Hawkinson, Medical Director of Infection Prevention and Control, joining us with our COVID count today. Good morning.
Hi. Hi. So right now, infections have gone up a little bit since the last few days. Again, we kind of really look for those 7 to 10 day trends, obviously. 20 active infections right now, 1 in the ICU, 0 on the ventilator. We didn't have any in the ICU yesterday, and 13 in that recovery period as well. So, really still holding steady, still high teens, low 20s. Hopefully we can stay here or get lower. But we know the last 2 weeks of reported data for CDC in cases, there has been increased cases for those weeks. So.
Okay, Dr. Hawkinson, it is Antibiotic Awareness Week. Tell us what we should know.
So vitally important. It is Antibiotics Awareness and Antibiotic Stewardship Weeks. It's so important, especially now during the winter time. We know people are really wanting to get on a Z-Pak or amoxicillin or Augmentin if they are sick. We know this is common. We do have a saying in medicine, though, common things are common. And if you look at this graph provided, or this infographic provided by the CDC, you'll see that most of these infections are viral infections. So we're starting in respiratory viral season, so we know there's a lot of common cold viruses out there. We also know about influenza, COVID-19. These things are caused by viruses. Those antibiotics like Augmentin, Z-Pak will not affect that. And it's only in those rare instances when you have things like middle ear infection, which children do get a lot, and it's extremely important to go to a medical provider to get examined. Or if you're adults, it's really after that 10-day to 2-week period of still having symptoms or worsening symptoms, or things like fevers, chills, things like that, that can maybe say that you have a bacterial infection, or it's evolved into a bacterial infection, maybe from an initial viral infection. But on this infographic here, you will see that the vast majority of common illnesses, especially during this time period, are viral. And so antibiotics are not needed. And it's extremely important to give antibiotics when they are needed, just like any medicine, but not give them when they aren't, because they do have side effects as well. And I think we are just going to continue to promote antibiotic stewardship and antibiotic awareness, and just be aware that for the vast majority of people, unless you are continuing to be ill or getting worse after that 10-day, 14-day period, most of these illnesses that are occurring right now are viral in nature. You may still have some lingering symptoms, especially from things like common cold, influenza, or COVID-19, things like cough and shortness of breath. But that is just, it takes time to get over that. So just be aware. And if you think you do need antibiotics, it's vitally important to go see a medical professional and get evaluated.
Dr. Hawkinson, thank you. Any reporters on the line? Let's get to our community. Joella has a question. Dr. Weese, how much can time management help with these types of issues, do you think? What stressors do schools put on students that could possibly be eliminated?
Ooh, that second question's asking me to get in some trouble. I think time management is very important. And you heard it in those videos, if you've listened to them, that they're juggling a lot. I think one of the students even said, I wish someone would tell me how to do this. Because they're desperately craving their adults to model this for them. I think it's important to prioritize with time, with most important thing coming up and the timeliness of it. So the most important things that are due first, that needs to be the priority. I think a mindfulness practice can help us be more efficient with our time. So like I said before, if I'm on Wednesday but worried about Friday, I'm going to lose Wednesday and I'm going to get stressed out about Friday. So it's not a good use of our mental energy. So if we want to be efficient with our mental energy, we need to practice this mindfulness idea. And I think our schools, I would just encourage our school system to continue to be really intentional. Am I giving this assignment because I think it's going to add value and worth to this student's learning opportunities, or am I doing it because I just need to grade something? You know, think about intentionality with time and the contact we have with these young folks.
So Jean has a question, and you've mentioned this. You both really harp on sleep. Jean just joining us asking how much does lack of sleep in teens contribute to these issues? Dr. Smith, I'll let you kind of give your spiel on that, because that's, I think you always put that number one.
Sleep, yeah. You know, in fact, at our last program where we before the concussion part of it, we talked about sleep disorders. It was the weekend we were doing the time change. And our sleep expert at the time really commented, I mean, he had multiple studies that he quoted about how important it is. The reality is that sleep is not always easy. You know, if we say go to bed at 10 o'clock at night and get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, they might say, well, I got a test tomorrow. I got to stay up a little bit later and study. Or maybe they have something on their mind. They didn't do well that day, or they had a struggle with a teammate or a girlfriend or boyfriend. So it's not that easy. And some people have trouble just getting to sleep or staying asleep. I was just talking to my wife about this last night, and melatonin, of course, is something that people will use for sleep. But now there's some information out that it's being pushed down on kids to try to get their sleep under control, and there's some concerns about children taking too much melatonin. So I don't think we ought to go take something to sleep. We need to start preparing ourselves for sleep, getting our mind relaxed before we go to bed. Mindfulness, Annie, I love when you mention that, because mindfulness is something that we try to get across to them. I have my own little mindfulness techniques I use. I used them coming down here today, so I don't mess up on the program. You know, I can relax and so forth. But yeah, sleep, we have to help them with that. And also, I say get up in the morning. I used to tell my kids, if you sleep until noon, first of all, you missed half the day. But secondly, it's not good. Your sleep clock gets all upset, and we need to stay on a fairly steady sleep clock.
Yeah, Dr. Weese, I mean, it seems like sleep's that one thing we feel like we can cheat, but it's not worth it.
It's not worth it. It impacts us physically with, cellular regeneration. It helps us with learning and memory, mood regulation, just thinking through decisions. And it's so vitally important. If I described all the benefits of sleep and said you could have it in pill form, every athlete would take it every day.
Yeah.
But, we don't realize, it's this thing that we're encouraged to do all the time. And what I see with my athletes is they don't have free time until 9, 10, 11 at night. And then that's when they want to be doing what they want to be doing, which means they might be gaming until 2, 3 in the morning. So our system does not encourage proper sleep. So I think for any parents or anyone with access to young folks out there, encourage good sleep hygiene. Turning off TVs and phones earlier, like limiting that blue light, getting cool, comfortable sleep conditions. There's a dozens of things that we can do to improve our sleep hygiene.
But they're not always easy, that's for sure, right?
That's exactly right. And all the stressors, we take with us throughout the day, they come back to haunt us at night when we slow down.
It, like you said, mindfulness, it takes practice. You have to practice doing those things, like you said, slowing down and having those moments. Last question, and I want to hear from both doctors today, but Carla's asking, why do you think we are seeing a spike in teens struggling with mental health? Do we think it's really a spike, or do you think they're more talking about it now? Dr. Smith, I'll let you, just based on your insight and what you hear and see in clinic, what do you think?
This is based on my opinion and my insight. I do think that they're more willing to bring these things up with people, but I think the pandemic, unfortunately, really precipitated a lot of this in that we shut down so much and we took away social interactions. and we allowed them more time maybe to spend on social media that potentially can detract from proper mental health exercises. And yet, it's hard to tell. There's also society changes. I mean, I think back 5 years ago, our society just looks completely different to me from 5 years ago. And you march it back 10, 15, 20 years ago. This is so different in my practice. I've been out practicing for 33 years, and it's completely different practice now than it was before. So I think there's a lot of factors that play into it, and yet the point is it's here, and let's deal with it. Let's not ignore it. Let's bring it to the forefront. I consider it now first and foremost when it comes to sports medicine care is the mental health of student athletes. All the other injuries are the same. ACL injuries, shoulder dislocations, fractures. We haven't really changed a lot with that over the years, and we've got new techniques and things to fix ACLs and so forth. But the mental health issue, we're getting better at. We need more experts like Dr. Weese, Dr. Nobles, Dr. Woods here. I mean, all across the state, we've got experts. Social workers in schools, school counselors, school nurses. I mean, I can give a shout out to so many professionals that are important. And of course, the parents, we have to model it as parents. And I think kids are not getting the modeling. I don't sleep properly all the time. I stress myself. I get burned out. But I know how to handle it now at my age, and we have to give these young people the tools in the toolbox and then model it and help them practice it and get them to experts like Dr. Weese when they need that.
Well, and I love hearing that, and I'm sure it's really refreshing that you say over 30 years practicing, but that you're changing with the times and changing with the times in the most important area of our young people's health. Dr. Weese, why do you think we're seeing this?
I get asked this question a lot, and I always have a hard time getting a firm answer. I think, just like Dr. Smith said, this world is much different than it was. These teens and youth and college athletes, they've never known a time where they didn't have to do an active shooter drill in grade school. That is not something I had to do when I was in grade school, middle school, high school, and college. So they are under tremendous amount of stress. They're dealing with life-threatening things, maybe not on a daily basis, but in society, we have learned now to be afraid of some things. So I think their brains are pumping more stress hormones through their bodies than maybe generationally was happening a couple generations ago. So they are under a tremendous amount of pain.
Well, and
I think. Yep.
No,
please.
Go ahead.
I would just say that flexibility and that adjustment is very important. And I know coaches are having a hard time right now thinking, well, why can't they just do this or why can't they just do that? Well, we need some understanding about how their brains are working and all the pressures they're under so that we can teach and coach them more effectively.
And one of our viewers just mentioned, and it can't be underestimated, the power of social media and just, that's like a whole other show, Dr. Smith, but that's brought on its a whole host of troubles, right?
That's right. If I had a conflict with a classmate in middle school, I could go home, I could kind of like cool off a little bit until I had to see them again. Now that interpersonal pressure is 24/7. And that is another thing keeping young folks up at night. What will I miss out on online if I go to sleep right now?
Right, and just the respite of being able to go home and kind of protect yourself and be home with family and parents and those who love you, and then to be able, like you said, go back and start fresh. It's like it finds you no matter where you are when it comes to that, right?
Yeah, I don't want to pick on cell phones because I'm tethered to my cell phone. I'm not sure I could live without it, but I remember my kids going off to a summer camp, and the rule there was no cell phones. Only one kid really pushed back on that, but they took the cell phones for the week, and 100% of the kids said that was so much more relaxing not to worry about having a cell phone, keeping in touch with people. When I saw my girls sitting around in our downstairs basement watching TV and they had a conflict, there'd be conflicting by text about someone sitting on the couch right next to them. I say the difference was the guys, if they conflicted, they get down on the carpet and start wrestling and get over it. And I thought, boy, this is just weird.
It's just weird. Weird is a good word.
I need to adapt because I'm different than them. And yet I feel bad. I mean, seriously, like Dr. Weese just said, I can't imagine going off to grade school, middle school, high school, and have to wonder in the back of my mind, could someone come in that school and start shooting up the place? I mean, I never thought about that. We had our troubles and some fights and things, but nothing like that. I would not
just
have
a
been
looming
prepared.
fear for your life.
Absolutely. It's terrible. We had 2 incidents just this week, University of Idaho and University of Virginia, of horrible tragedies. And we just didn't have that when I was in college. And Dr. Weese, I'm sure you're experiencing in that a lot, just some of the athletes talking about some of those concerns. So anyway, we could ramble forever on this, but it's so important. And we've got to keep it out in the forefront and talk. That's why we have this program
Yeah, and
today.
that's absolutely heartbreaking.
Yeah.
The 3 young men that were lost this week to gun violence. It's our hearts go out to all of those families and the school and those students. I do want to get our final thoughts today. It's just a really good, anytime we talk about mental health, I think it's just my favorite subject because it really affects every single person here and around us. So Dr. Weese, again, thank you for these videos. I want to remind everyone it's called Mental Health Matters. It's a 5-series videos, and it's fantastic for teachers and coaches and students and parents. And there's the information on your screen. Final thoughts, Dr. Weese, what do you want us to know?
I just want folks to know that help is there. Along with those Mental Health Matters videos, there's a toolkit with some more specific phrases you can use in high-stress situations to help deregulate and get the student help. And I want everyone to know seriously that asking the question of, are you feeling suicidal, could literally save lives.
Thank you. Dr. Smith, final.
One thing that we didn't mention was the national number now, 988, that people can call. It's like a 911 number, get mental health services 24/7. The National Federation of High School Association, Athletic Association came up with a text. I have trouble remembering it, but it's 741-741. If you text that number, they have a volunteer mental health professionals available. So those 2 things I'd like people to be aware of. And then I thought about it, you always ask me to summarize my thoughts. And I think, God gave us 2 eyes and gave us 2 ears and gave us 1 mouth. So we should be looking, we should be listening, and maybe not talking as much. Let's be aware. Let's watch people. Let's get our mind and our eyes off ourselves and onto others. Every day, be aware of someone that you might be able to make a difference in their life, just being aware of what they might be struggling with. If we can all do that, I think that we can make a dent in what we're seeing as an exponential rise in mental health issues.
Well, that's why I ask your final thoughts, because you always have really good ones.
Thank you.
Good to see you. Dr. Weese, thank you so much. Please come back and see us very soon. Dr. Hawkinson, your final thoughts.
Yeah, I'm glad we can, talk more openly about mental health issues and get help as needed for that. So vitally important. I know it just runs through our lives every day for many, many people. Switching want to also go back to antibiotic awareness and antibiotic stewardship week, again, beginning today, going through the next 7 days. Just be aware that there are a lot of viruses out there. For viruses, you aren't going to need those antibiotics. If you feel you do, it is vitally important to get to a medical professional to get evaluated. But otherwise, most of the therapy is going to be pain control with Tylenol, ibuprofen, fluids, rest, and nutrition. But obviously, if it's influenza or COVID-19, you do want to get checked early and get on those antiviral therapies rather than those antibacterial therapies.
Doc Hawk, thanks so much, and thank you for being with us today. You can catch our updates anytime by logging onto Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Go out, have a great weekend, be safe, be careful, and we'll see you back here Monday at 8. Coming up Monday on the Morning Medical Update, 55 million people are expected to travel over Thanksgiving this year, according to AAA. That's a 98% increase over pre-COVID. How many do you think are vaccinated and plan to wear a mask? I'm Jessica Lovell. Coming up Monday, KC travel agent Kathy Sudeikis is back with the best and worst days to travel to avoid crowds. Plus, a mental health expert offers tips on keeping calm on the road and at home. See you at 8.
Subscribe to our Morning Medical Update and Open Mics with Dr. Stites podcast. Now, everywhere podcasts are available.